Hi, I am Joe Cassavaugh. I am the Joe in Puzzles by Joe. I am about to release my 13th Clutter game called Clutter's Greatest Hits, plus the B-sides. And if you look closely at the B, you can see the B is actually 13. That is my 13th Clutter. And I often hide the number in the game somehow, either Roman numerals or silly stuff. Anyways, we're going to go really quick, and I'm actually very excited for this talk. I'm not going to so much, it's not a detailed one where I show you specifically, specifically how to accomplish it in code or whatever. But I'm going to talk about some ideas and then show you how I applied them in Clutter to make my levels design and actually just getting out the game go quicker. So we're going to go pretty quick, but I hope you enjoy this. Okay, the alternate title for this was Refactoring Yourself for Fun and Profit. I've spent 11 plus years doing the Clutter games. About to put out my 13th plus game because there's another game called Sliders that was in there too. My first game had 500 levels and my current games has over 2,100 levels. And you just can't do that many levels if you truly did them as individual levels. So there's some tricks and some other stuff I do and that I'm going to explain and go from there. Okay, one of the things that always bothered me when I work for somebody else is they always want you to tread water faster. And most companies will not pay you to really learn to swim better. However, when it's yourself, you can truly justify taking a little longer now if you know it's going to save you time and time and time and more time in future games, etc. Okay, also, my game is not a super AAA, gorgeous-looking game. It is truly a commodity. It is like a can of coffee beans. Yeah, anyways, it's like coffee beans, cans going down a treadmill, and it does not matter how shiny that that coffee can is. All the people care about is getting that next can of coffee, and all that matters is really the distance down the treadmill that next coffee can is coming. But I mean, you do have to have a certain amount of quality. You can't just shove out games, shove out games, shove out games. But you have to do, I've learned you have to do the quality plus the quantity. And the only way you can do that is truly by some software engineering techniques that I've learned over the time and by constantly trying to improve my own process. Okay, and better living through tools, that's just kind of obvious. But faster iteration, again, I can't say it enough, is the key. And you do that, one of the things, again, you focus on the short term, getting my next game out, but at the same time doing little things to make future development better. And I really didn't do this until I moved to Unity because under the old system, I knew I was eventually going to go to Unity. So I knew I was eventually not going to use the old system. So getting that system better and better and then throwing it away wouldn't be a good use of the time. But as soon as I went to Unity, I got even more serious about refactoring my own process and getting better at what I needed to do to get the next game out faster. 3 is once too many for me. This is one little rule of thumb. I'll do something manually once. I can even justify it twice if I'm trying to get the game out, but the third time it happens, I'm going to fix the problem and try to find a way to automate whatever it is. I call that grinding the grind out. I don't want grind. I want my development to be fun, etc. Oh, I need to do one thing here. I'm starting my own clock just so that I'm aware of time. Okay, so anyways, I want the game to be, I want game development for myself to be fun. Otherwise, it does in fact become a grind. So anything that's really this manual process that I have to do over and over again, I want to figure out a way to get rid of that. Let's see. Back to here. Okay. When in doubt, Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese word that really means just incremental improvement, constant incremental improvement. And that really is just my mindset, has been for a number of years, and that's it. It's a good thing to you. Okay, a cacophony of Clutter Constructions. This is really just stuff in my background that I just want to talk about briefly, and then I'll tell you how I applied it. So one thing younger people don't seem to know that much about is they don't know the difference between frameworks and libraries. And libraries, they'll know what a library is, and it's a little piece of code that you use in your code to make something easier. But that helps you solve a problem, but it's not the same as a framework. A framework is something your code sits in, and you learn rules of the framework so that the framework does a lot for you that you don't have to do. Excuse me. Repeatedly. But you have to play by the rules of the framework. So they're very powerful, especially if you write your own, and that's what I've basically done. I worked in a framework for iWin, and I brought most of the functionality of that framework over to Unity, and we'll talk about how I did that later. Okay. One of the things Unity stresses is, it's all container. But inheritance is very important too, and I use some C# inheritance along with the Unity container model because it does some powerful stuff. And again, we'll get into that when I talk about my framework, etc. Okay, flat files and indirection. It's nice to have WYSIWYG things where you drag things in and you do things, etc. But sometimes flat files is a good answer. And if you have a level of indirection where anything in that flat file can be the thing itself, or it can be a pointer to the real thing, that's very powerful. Okay. JSON, I know, I don't like to learn new things unless I really have a reason, so I haven't learned JSON. I've seen it, I use it to do settings in Unity and stuff, but I still use my very flat files because I go by the KISS method, and unless I have a reason for going to something more complex, I don't do it. And there's some things I wanted to process in my flat files that I think would be a little more difficult if I had to read them in with the JSON scripts first and then try to manipulate it. But I could be wrong about that. JSON might be perfect for me if I spent the time, but the KISS method is keep it simple, stupid, and I'm used to my flat files, and that's what I do. Okay. I already touched on this a little bit, but basically WYSIWYG is, Windows. What you see is what you get. But there's power in, having a corn shell or a shell that you use, or I use awk strips. Some people use Perl, whatever. There's power in batch scripts to do stuff. And it's always important to keep in mind what they can do better than, a Windows environment or a WYSIWYG environment. Okay. Never underestimate naming conventions. Just by naming things correctly, you can write routines where the existence of the thing allows your code to work in one way versus the non-existent makes it do something else. And for instance, in my pop-up help, that's what I do. I'm allowed to put in text in my pop-up help text file that if it exists, it will show you that when you hit that level. And again, it's all conventions and other things, but it's very, it saves you a lot of trouble than trying to tell each level what their help is. And it's tough to explain to other people, but when you're working by yourself, it's really, really powerful. Okay, I just always wanted to say this is the don't repeat yourself principle. But basically, if you write two pieces of code that are the same in two different areas, you just shouldn't do it. You just created a nightmare for your own support. And it's too easy with the tools now. Just grab it, name it something. For me, if it's in a class inheritance, it might go down to the base, but just put it somewhere, name it something, and move on. Okay. Basically, cutting and pasting, you just shouldn't do. Okay. Necessity is the mother of motivation to learn a new tool. I really wait until I have a reason before I move forward. Okay. Cheat codes sometimes evolve into new features. I add tons of cheat codes in my code that are only used by me while developing, but occasionally I'll do something and I go, oh, you know what, that would be nice, and maybe I should put it in an interface and let my customers do it too. Sometimes you create something. it's hard to see 10,000 miles or even 5,000 miles. But sometimes you see, 500 miles or whatever. You do something little to help improve something. And then once you do that, you go, oh, I can do that other thing. And it's really hard to see that other thing until you do the first thing. And it's just something to keep in mind that you don't have to solve all the problem. You just want to take the step forward. And again, you want to keep your eyes open that maybe that step forward has now led you to a different view, and now maybe you can do something else that's even better. But trying to think of that something way, way better at first seems to be counterproductive, at least for me. Okay, one-button testing is its own reward, and that's kind of obvious, but basically it's just something I always keep in mind that I want to automate. Even a 3-step process is horrible if you can get it down to 1. Now, you can't always do that, but that's where I'm always thinking. Okay, here's some specific examples in the post-Unity clutter world. And by post-Unity, I mean post going to Unity. So I'm going to give some specific examples now, and that's going to be the rest of the talk, and then a little bit of a wrap-up. So here we go. So this is called Yeah, It Can Do That. And here are 4 screens from 4 different types of games in my clutter games. The clutter gaps has in the lower right has a pop-up help. You can't really see the background, but it also looks similar. It has that top bar that looks very similar, as you can see in all 3 games. And you can see that clutter has those 3 circles that the others don't have, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that all comes from this one thing, which is this huge monolithic prefab. And it serves, along with the fact that every one of my games, a clutter game is actually a mini game. And clutter pieces have mini pieces, and even clutter config file is really a mini config. They all have this nesting, this base class that work well with the objects that are in this prefab to keep the details away from game-specific code. So clutter sliders, box quotes, they don't need to know how next puzzle works, how previous puzzle works, how next picture works, how restart, how pause, how help, all of that, how to go to the menu. They don't need to know any of that. You just write the game in its little space, and the magic mini game in this prefab, which is called the mini game canvas, does the rest. And that's truly my framework, that if anybody wanted to write a game that fit into my system, that's the first thing they have to really understand. But all they'd have to worry about is their little game, and then trust that everything else sort of magically works, which is what it does. Okay. If you shrink it, they will work. This is just something I wanted to share. My interface, which we're going to go back to, if you look closely, it's all this orange, these orange little, the X, the up arrow, the volume control, etc. But they all came. I made those all. I'm very proud of this. This is probably my best interface ever. And I learned it from a trick. I used a trick that one of my artists taught me, which is kind of obvious, but to a programmer it really isn't, which is do things big and then shrink it at the end, and it hides, a lot. So basically I use this big orange ball. Even though the gray things are a little rough around the edges, you're really just using the silhouette of them. And then you grab it, and then you pop a little. You expand the size. I'm losing the word, but you know what I mean. The outline. You expand the outline and grab a little black, and then you've got your stuff. And then you shrink it down to the level you want, and it looks great in the game. And I wouldn't have done this, 5 years ago. But now it's really easy, and it's Unity makes it even better, because my old system really didn't stretch things well in the game. Well, Unity will let you have anything, any size. So sometimes these things appear different sizes depending on where they're used, and it looks fine under Unity. Okay. Canvas size. This is another little trick I learned. It's really nice. Here. So we'll say the whole name here. There we go. So canvas size scripts, batches, and presets. I use Paint Shop Pro because it's the first thing I learned, and like I said, I don't like to learn new things when I already know something that does work well enough. So I don't do Adobe Photoshop because, again, Paint Shop Pro is what I started with. I have batches that will take 300 pictures, and the pictures could be huge. And the first thing they'll do is they'll shrink it to that picture on the left of the boy playing the piano, where the horizontal is the correct size, but the vertical might be a little bit too big. And then it sends it through another thing called canvas size, which for years I didn't know what it did. And this is a great thing, I used to shrink it that one way, and then I'd open up a blank template that had my correct size of what I wanted, and then I would put it in and I would adjust it. It just sucked. Now it really is just a 2-second thing when I go in and grab a new picture, and I can run a whole batch on a bunch of pictures and get these. Also, around the edges, you have the square, circles, and octagons, and they can also cut from any picture at all. Boom, you get those. And once I did that, that's a good example of, I did that, what else can I do? I created a variation of that basically gives me the ring guy, and then the guy that sits in the center, but he's bigger, so he's not quite the same as the circles that are outside. That little boy up there, for instance, and when you play the game, they go into each other, and the guy shrinks half, so you see how he fits into the hole. And I did this because I have a record theme for the Clutter 13, and I thought of this, and I said, hey, that's great. But again, this is something I do I literally hit a button. I go into my Paint Shop Pro, I set up a directory that has a bunch of pictures in it, and then I just run a batch, and I tell it a couple things, but it basically just runs. And the batch is filled with 3 different scripts, and it's magic. It's really nice. Okay, flat file fun. So quickly, if you look at the green area there, that's the way my files used to look for years and years and years over at iWin and even here. And when I started to get serious about how do I look at an entire quest at once, I got the idea, which is so obvious, but it took me forever to get it, is let's add a semicolon and let's put multiple parameters on one line. So that green area becomes more, if you look at the blue, where I have a puzzle and I have a bunch of parameters that all, go out from that. And it handles multi-line still. And if you look closely over on the right, in the bluish, you'll see there's a level of indirection there where this 01 is pointing to letter stack, and letter stack is a bunch of other parameters. And it's really nice because it overrides. It looks in one place, and then if it can't find it, it goes to the override, which is what the O stands for 01. And it's very powerful. So once I did that, if you look at the red area, it's a very nice, that's actually 64 puzzles because it's 8 columns and 8 rows. And in the rows, it's the object sets mostly that are being mucked with. And in the columns, it's specific other parameters that define the game that goes with the different object sets. And therefore, really, these 16 lines create, 64 puzzles. And it's great. And that's all I can say. Okay, we're just moving on. It's what's nice about this is the biggest thing is instead of scrolling screen to screen, trying to understand what a land is or I can look at it all at once and again understand it better. And all that helps. Indirection, flat files, everything. And again, this is something I didn't want JSON code sort of getting in the middle of this or having to me read in what JSON already reads in and then do something else with it. So, okay, moving on. All at once, yet one at a time. So to review the game and to have other people to review the game easily, I actually wanted a way to dump out the entire game, and that's easy to do in Unity. There's a thing called a screenshot, and basically I had an exerciser already that I could step through with the spacebar, And I just basically, I wanted this 2 or 3 different ways, so I actually have a couple different things I run, and then I name everything well. This is a good example of naming things well, where you then dovetail them together by putting them in the same directory. And what's nice is, again, I can review this. I can review this in the game one at a time, but I can also I can either just zip up the directory to somebody and they can actually read the entire game and do proofreading for me. And they can get the story and everything the way it's presented in the game. So give feedback without playing the game, which is very nice. And this really, this was like a day's worth of work, if that. Once I got the idea and really thought it through. So, okay. Good enough for you is even better for me. So often I do things for myself and I put a cheat code in, but then I say, you know what? I really want the user to be able to do this. So for instance, in my game, you can go to the help book and you can actually pull up a storybook within the help book and the player can read the entire story. Back and forth, jump to the end, it doesn't matter. But they can read all the story text by itself. They can also read all the pop-up help text by itself. It's very, it's nice. And some people like the fact that I did that. Even this has keyboard cheats like the space bar that I use that they're not allowed to use. Even though they use everything else. And again, it's just doing anything I can to make my review easier. So in fact, while I'm reviewing the story this way, I can smartly reload my pop-up text file. I can edit my pop-up text, and without even getting in and out of the game, I can hit P and then the space bar, and this will actually just refresh with my new text in it, which is great. And I wrote that first because at one point, Gamehouse did all the translations for me. And then I tried to provide them tools to review that. And then my tools really weren't good enough, so I finally did this. And I end up doing it anyways, but it was the need for reviewing 5 languages that got me off my butt to actually put this in the game and do it that way. But again, this is another thing that took maybe a day total for everything I wanted to do. Okay, moving on. This is one of the last things. So I wanted options that I expose, and one of the nice things in Unity that worked really well is this is another good example. Basically, just by naming something, I give it a name that's unique. I attach my own button handler to it, and I tell it it's a toggle. And that toggle actually has a default, so on or off. And from that point on, any place in my code anywhere can go say, get the state of the story toggle, and they can tell whether it's on or off. And they can flip it. They can do whatever. So, and actually flipping it is all this, and this sort of happens automatically. And even though I WYSIWYG this and put these toggles here and, but the name exposure, everything is done automatically. That name checks the pop-up text file to see whether you're in another language, whatever. It all just magically works, which is really, really, really nice. So it just takes me 2 seconds to put a new toggle into the game and start using it. It's just that easy. Okay. I wanted to end with what I really do to get games out as quickly as I do. So I create new Clutter project from the old Clutter code base as soon as the old game is locked down enough. I code my new ideas first, get those right out of the way. I refactor early on in the next game. Anything I think I want to do big enough that's been bothering me, I want to do early so I have plenty of time to test it and run into it. So if I refactor later in the game, I might touch something that I don't realize and not get to test it, and it's a bug that goes out. So I like to refactor early before, so that I can up my odds of finding it if I did anything wrong. Okay, I then get to feature complete. I then get to code complete. I finish the main quest and story, which is just, variables at this point and, picking and choosing and writing the story. then I lock down the remaining areas, and then I play test and run my automated test. I do spell grammar check at the end. If you do it earlier than the end, what happens is you're going to have to do it again anyways, because if you make even a minor change, boy, you got to go, make sure you didn't blow it, right? So I do that at the very, very end. I still fix things along the way when I see them, but I don't do the formal check until the very, very end. Saves me time. And then I release the prepaid beta, which my customers understand that they run the risk of losing their progress in the game, but I automate that so that I can do multiple versions out, and if it's not a major version, it won't reset them all. If it's a major version, it resets them, everything's clean, and that's all automatic. Otherwise, it just lets them keep going. And then I ship to distributors while doing more testing, automated and playing, because it takes the distributors at least a month or so to get the game out. So I get my final stuff while the beta people are playing, and even though the distributors have it, they might get another version. And they're real good, because I've been good at giving them, a final version and saying, oh, these 3 things change, it's no big deal, and they're still fine with it QA-wise, and my track record's really good. Okay, and now the final step, ingredient, habit, etc. is this. And what is this? Okay, this is lather, rinse, and repeat. Yep. Just keep doing it over and over and over again. Next game ready, etc. And I love this picture, and I found it, and I look for a lot of pictures, and I love synchronicities when I show it, because there is a second part to this lather, rinse, repeat, which is make sure that all your ducks are in a row. Just keep constantly thinking, did I forget anything? What do I need to do? Anyways, that is it. I am the Joe of Puzzles by Joe. This has been Clutter's Greatest Hits. The B-sides coming out soon, and there's my address and so forth, and I can make this whole presentation available to anybody who wants it. And that's it. Andrew, what would you like from me?
Excellent stuff. And I'm afraid to ask what you searched to find the dog and the duck picture.
Lather, rinse, repeat. And then shower. And then I didn't like shower pictures of humans, so I said, bath pets or something. And that's how I found that.
Nice. Oh.
I wanted a guy or a girl, but when I looked at them, there was just nothing that was, I'm too damn woke to put a shower of a hunky guy or a cute girl. Just didn't work.
And everybody knows that a good picture of a dog will sell.
This is true.
Now, we don't have time for many questions. First one from Morris Taylor. Can Unity terminate your ability to make games in Unity?
Can what?
Can Unity terminate your ability to make games in Unity? They're applying it to how Google and Apple can kick you off their stores, but I don't think Unity has any sort of
I don't think so. I mean, I guess if you use porn, I don't even mention Unity in my games anymore, right? If you're using it for free, maybe if you put a free app that was total porn that says you made by Unity, they'd have problems and come after you. But I don't even show the Unity because I have to pay them. I pay $12.50, right? $1,250 a month, something like that. 1,500, yeah, 125 a month, something like that, right?
Right.
I forget what it is.
Excellent.
Like $12.50 a year or $1,500 a year to use Unity.
All right. Next question. What other, you talked about only using the Unity functions that you're comfortable with. What Unity functionality that you're not using are you considering adding?
Well, I actually didn't say that, but I'm surprised. But you're right. I'm a Unity expert in flat 2D. I locked the camera down. I use Unity, I use Lean Tween, that's about it, and I use Text Mesh Pro. And everything else is just shoving pixels around and really just C# for most of it.
All right, last question. Can you say flat file fun 3 times fast?
Probably not.
All right. All right, everybody, that was Puzzles by Joe. Thank you very much. We're going to go to our next presentation on using a bunch of tools we don't usually think of for level design. So hold on, and we'll get it here. Thanks
for having me, Andrew.